Trumping the competition, property billionaire Donald Trump takes another step towards the Republican nomination after his main rival drops out. Also in today's program, there's no smoke without fire as a new report endorses vaping as a tool in the fight against tobacco. We're asking whether the use of e-cigarettes should be regulated. And in picture this, a mass evacuation as a wildfire races towards Canada's Fort McMurray. Hello and welcome to the Newsmakers with me, Imran Garda. It's a race that appeared to be bitterly fought and at times descended into personal insults. But in the end, it looked to be an easy victory for Donald Trump. His main rival is out of the race for the Republican nomination, and now, barring any interference from the party, he looks set to win it outright. He may have been the outsider candidate, but now he is the presumptive nominee, and most probably one of the two people who could become the next president of the United States. Today's newsmaker is Donald Trump, as we ask whether anything or anyone can stop him.
When you're negotiating against China and you're negotiating against these Japanese guys that are going to come at you in waves.
Many thought his campaign was a sideshow.
The leaders are so stupid and so incompetent and so inept.
Loud, brash, shallow.
I don't even know what the hell they're talking about. It's an ad. Can she stay? Can she stay? Bye-bye.
But Donald Trump is now the main show, at least for the Republican Party. His main challenger for the nomination, Ted Cruz, has dropped out of the race after a loss in Indiana. That puts the billionaire mogul in prime position. Donald J. Trump, possible president of the United States. Trump announced his bid in June last year, but he quickly stumbled, calling Mexican immigrants criminals and rapists. Then there was the campaign violence.
I'd like to punch him in the face, I'll tell you.
And at different rallies, some supporters targeted minorities. Despite this, Trump won early primaries in New Hampshire, South Carolina, and Nevada. Pollsters said his populist platform was getting through to voters.
Thank you, Indiana. I love you.
And he continued to chalk up more wins, all spurred on by a media machine covering his every move. So Trump is now the presumptive Republican nominee, but many in the party core are not happy about it, and Trump doesn't yet have enough delegates to prevent a challenge at the Republican convention in July. If he doesn't get those delegates between now and then, the Republican National Committee could put forward an alternative candidate. And that's just half the battle. So far, Trump only needs to sell his message to Republicans. As the presidential candidate, he'll have to win over the wider voting public and go up against a Democrat, either Bernie Sanders or Hillary Clinton. And that's the real challenge, getting the Trump train to roll into the White House. Soraya Lenny, the Newsmakers.
Well, joining me now from Washington, D.C. to discuss Trump's victory, we have Ron Bonjean, a former spokesman to Senate Majority Leader Trent Lott and a Republican strategist. Thanks a lot for joining us, Ron. Donald Trump recently implied Ted Cruz's dad was involved in the JFK assassination. There was one of many, many attacks against Cruz. I guess, have those attacks worked, or was Cruz just not good enough and likable enough for the Republican electorate overall?
I think it was a combination of both. I mean, Donald Trump always dominated the media cycle by making these over-the-top attacks against his rivals, you know, Ted Cruz being the latest. And they're forced to respond to his attacks, and that then carries them off message for days, even weeks. So look, I think Donald Trump did not think that Ted Cruz was going to drop out in Indiana and decided to launch another attack that would have lasted 2 or 3 days and forced Ted Cruz off his message. Now, if you saw how quickly Trump pivoted in his primary election night speech in New York, he was magnanimous and he praised Ted Cruz for being a formidable candidate. So you can see how quickly Trump's tactics had changed.
Yeah, there are those who say, the primaries are about divisive rhetoric, but then you get to a general election, it becomes about consensus because you have to win over the broader electorate. Are we going to see a softer Trump if he becomes the candidate, which is very likely? Are we going to see a softer Trump between now and November?
Why, you know what? It's really hard to say. I think that he has been very successful by being on the offensive, but he will need to repair the high negatives that he has among women, among Hispanics, in order to put a coalition together for the election in November. At the same time, I think that going after Hillary Clinton and trying to define her while she's fending off Bernie Sanders is probably also a smart move to do too.
Is there ever any likelihood of a coup d'etat within, of Republicans rallying against the man who got the most delegates?
Yeah, I think as time goes on, after we get through the Republican convention and Donald Trump is the nominee, or most likely going to be the nominee, that some of these people that are against Donald Trump and are saying they're refusing to vote for him will actually come around and the party will partially heal. However, there's going to be some steadfast folks who will not support Donald Trump no matter what happens. However, I find it very difficult that they would be casting a vote for Hillary Clinton. So it will really depend on what they want to do in the voting booth on Election Day. I just don't see them, crossing over and supporting Democrats.
Oh, so you see no chance of any high-profile red defections to blue?
At this point, no, I don't think so. I think that would be rather devastating for some of these high-profile politicians to actually cross over and support Hillary Clinton. But they may just sit on their hands for a while. I think many Republicans out there who have remained silent through all this are looking for Donald Trump to earn their vote, to see whether or not this was just a primary campaign strategy, and see whether or not he will actually successfully court the coalition for a general election.
Mm-hmm. Okay, let's think general election again now. In many ways, despite being an international businessman, he seems to be pushing an isolationist message on many issues, on trade, on foreign intervention, versus Hillary Clinton's internationalist approach, right? Is that going to be possibly his weapon of choice against her?
Yeah, that's what's most fascinating, is that I think for the first time in history as a Republican candidate, he's actually going to run to the left of Hillary Clinton as well as to the right of Hillary Clinton. He's going to run to the left of her on issues like trade and foreign intervention. If you looked at his foreign policy speech he delivered last week, his title was America First. He's definitely leaning towards an isolationist mantra here, but I think it all boils down to connecting with the American voters who feel fed up and angry at the way things have been going, and those issues on trade and American intervention around the world feed into that anger because they feel like it's been unsuccessful in the economy and on their foreign policy.
Governor Kasich's still in the race. Technically, he hasn't pulled out. Is he wasting his time?
Kasich is an interesting person. The fact that he's still in this race, he has so few delegates, it's unlikely that he will emerge successful at a convention because Donald Trump is likely going to be the nominee. I think right now the biggest leverage that Kasich has is the fact that Donald Trump needs the Republican Party to be unified. And in order to get Kasich's support, Donald Trump may need to figure out how to get Kasich over into his camp and withdraw his candidacy. I don't really see a path for Kasich other than, getting some TV coverage between now and the convention. It doesn't make much sense anymore about why he's in the race.
We've been taking it for granted that Hillary Clinton's going to be the Democratic nominee. Does Bernie Sanders stand any chance whatsoever from here on in pipping her to the post?
No, Hillary Clinton is likely going to be the nominee, although he has surprised everyone with Indiana. What the biggest challenge that she has is dealing with someone who's defining her, just like Donald Trump is defining her, as an old establishment candidate, a been there, done that she had her chance, and that she is allied with the big banks and Wall Street. That is not helpful to her while she's trying to pivot into a general election. The fact that Bernie Sanders is still trying to define her and define what the Democratic Party is all about when she needs to move forward.
18 months ago, Ron, if I told you we were going to be where we are right now in this election cycle come May, would you have told me that I'm insane?
Yes, I would have called you crazy and laughed it off and gone back to my business. No one knew. And if you could tell me what would happen the rest of this year, I would be a rich man right now. I wish I really could forecast the future here. It's really, when you have a Republican candidate like Donald Trump with these high negatives among women, Hispanics, and other demographics, you would think that he would lose the general election, but I just don't count him out. I think that he will likely become a chameleon and change overnight and change his rhetoric and try to peel away those voters. I think anything can happen at this point.
What unbelievable times we live in. Ron Bonjean, thank you very much for joining us. Still to come on the Newsmakers, we're looking at the debate over e-cigarettes and whether they really are a healthier alternative. And in picture this, an entire city is evacuated as a wildfire closes in. The UK's Royal College of Physicians has released a report saying e-cigarettes can prevent almost all of the harm from conventional smoking. And it says it can move us all towards a society where tobacco doesn't exist. But that advice appears at odds with how governments are viewing the devices. Several countries have already banned them, and the European Union is set to impose tighter regulation later this month. The Newsmakers' Duncan Crawford reports.
E-cigarettes are more and more popular, with millions of people now vaping. They work by using a battery to heat liquid nicotine that becomes vapor and is inhaled, providing a nicotine hit without the tobacco. Many users of e-cigarettes say they are vaping to try to quit tobacco cigarettes.
Every day we get more and more people coming in wanting to start vaping. Regardless if it's good news, bad news or indecisive, it doesn't really matter. People want to quit smoking, they come to us.
Doctors and scientists have long debated the health benefits of e-cigarettes. In the US, 365 people were hospitalised after accidents involving e-liquids in 2013, often due to poisoning. But every year, nearly 6 million people die from tobacco smoking-related illnesses, and there are growing calls to help wean people off tobacco by using e-cigarettes. The UK's Royal College of Physicians now says e-cigs do help people quit smoking.
Smokers can be reassured to use them, the public can be reassured that they're not going to cause significant harm.
Not everyone agrees. A scientific report in California suggested e-cigarettes are no safer than smoking tobacco, and the World Health Organization says more research needs to be done. Across the world, the sale of e-cigarettes is now banned in more than a dozen countries, including Turkey, Brazil and Mexico. At the moment, most are unlikely to reverse the bans, as the debate over the health benefits of e-cigarettes continues. Duncan Crawford, The Newsmakers.
Well, joining me now to discuss whether e-cigarettes are saving lives or encouraging smokers is Christopher Snowdon in Brighton. He's the Director of Lifestyle Economics at the Institute of Economic Affairs. And in Brussels is Enrico Brivio from the European Commission for Health. Gentlemen, thank you very much for joining us. Christopher Snowdon, let me start with you. To vape or not to vape? That is the question. I guess you'd say to vape.
Okay, thank you. Thank you so much.
If you're a smoker, certainly, you should be looking at switching to vaping and see how you get on. That's what I did over 3 years ago. I was quite a heavy smoker, switched to e-cigarettes, once I found one that worked, or once I found a fluid that I got on with. And this is one of the problems with the EU regulations. It's going to stifle innovation. You know, there's still a lot of smokers out there who've tried e-cigarettes and don't like them for whatever reason. It's a very dynamic sector, the e-cigarette industry, and the products are changing all the time. And it's very important for a wide range of choice to be available to smokers who are thinking about switching. And all these petty regulations from the European Union is unfortunately just going to dampen all that innovation.
Enrico Brivio, these are petty regulations that are dampening innovation. What do you think?
No, absolutely not. There is just some regulation that was, by the way, confirmed today by the European Court of Justice that fixes some minimum requirement to protect the safety and the quality of these relatively new products, so for the benefit of the consumer. So I think that between those people who want to ban e-cigarettes and those who want to liberalize it completely, I think we have a very sensitive position. The Commission decided to fix some minimum requirements for the benefit of consumer, of information, of quality, and to protect the health of this relatively kind of new product.
Yes, Enrico, looking at some of those new regulations, they are warnings, and then you have the nicotine level caps, restricted advertising. Aren't you worried that you can over-regulate the market and then e-cigarette smokers go back to cigarettes, and then the producers themselves also, they decide to go back to selling normal cigarettes because it's not worth their while selling this stuff anymore because it's over-regulated? Isn't there a fine balance that you need to keep in mind as well?
No, because the regulation, even on the packages of cigarette now, is getting much stricter. So don't forget that e-cigarettes are a lighter regulation that real cigarettes, where we're going to have, as you know, in some countries now we have plain packaging, we have very shocking pictures now on cigarettes. So I wouldn't say that e-cigarettes are more regulated or are regulated at the same level. And at the same time, you have to keep in mind that we want e-cigarette to become a way to help smokers to quit, but there could be also the problem that we don't want them to become the gateway for young people to start being addicted to nicotine. So it's very important to have a balanced position on that.
Okay, Christopher Snowdon, a gateway drug basically for young people. How do you respond to that?
Well, there's no evidence whatsoever that e-cigarettes are a gateway to smoking. They're quite the reverse. They're a gateway for millions of people away from smoking, people who've tried nicotine patches, who've tried cold turkey, tried every other form of quitting. E-cigarettes really do seem to be quite revolutionary in terms of their appeal to smokers as a recreational product, not as a medical product, but as a recreational product. And some of these regulations are going to effectively encourage smoking. Anything you do to clamp down on e-cigarettes is tantamount to being carefree and reckless about smoking. If you take, for example, the limit on nicotine in the fluid that will come in from May the 20th, it's quite a low limit. It's 20 milligrams of nicotine per milliliter. So 2 per 10 milliliters. Excuse me. It's quite a low level. It's about the level I use. I know lots of people who use a lot more than that, and particularly smokers who are just starting out using e-cigarettes. They find they do need a lot more nicotine than people who've been using them for quite a long time. Now, there's no scientific or health reason to limit the amount of nicotine in nicotine fluid whatsoever. It's pure bloody-minded pettiness on the part of the European Commission. Very little of this has been thought through very well at all. The advertising ban's another example. You know, you've got to let people know that these products are out there, make them look attractive to smokers. There is nothing really in this directive to do with e-cigarettes that is going to ensure quality or safety. That can all be done through normal consumer protection laws. Possibly the biggest hazard with e-cigarettes is that every now and again you read about one of them blowing up. This is an electrical issue to do with batteries, and it can be sorted with normal consumer regulation.
Okay, Enrico, you guys are petty regulators. Mind your own business, live and let live, and stay out of it. The nicotine level has nothing to do with it. Your response?
No, it's not. we have to do with nicotine because it is, don't forget, it's a toxic, addictive substance. So we are very happy if it is used to quit smoking as a path for someone who wants to quit. But as I said, first of all, you need to have adequate information, adequate warning to avoid, for instance, the young people use it for the reverse reason, to get into smoking, and also because to have a too high level, it doesn't simply make sense. You have to have an adequate level of release, and we just fixed a maximum level that is, but eventually could be revised in the future, but I think it proved to be a sensible one. And so I think a minimum standard of regulation, of information and protection to assure also the quality standard that these products don't break, I mean, are safe also if children get hold of them. I mean, these are minimum standards that I think we have to regulate, and it's for the best for the consumers.
Enrico, when we consider that this argument that this helps hardcore smokers to wean themselves off of this stuff by using the e-cigarettes and vaping, would you eventually want the e-cigarettes to be classified as medical products?
There are some medical products that, in fact, can release even a higher standard of nicotine, but they have to be used with a certain care. And this is not excluded by the EU regulation at all. And we are also in the process of collecting all information from member states on the basis of experience, because being a relatively new product, as you know, there are studies that you mentioned that go in different directions. We have to examine all the science-based data as we can have, because this is very important also to get a clearer picture for the future.
Okay, talking about science-based data, Christopher Snowdon, University of California study. Vaping is no safer than smoking. E-cigarette vapor damages DNA in ways that could lead to cancer. That's empirical science. Shouldn't that say, hey, we need to back off and be careful?
There are quite a hardcore of anti-smoking zealots in the California area who've been coming up with all sorts of scare stories about e-cigarettes. I'm pleased to say that I live in a country here in the UK where we've taken much more of a science-based approach. We've had Public Health England and the Royal College of Physicians both come out very strongly for e-cigarettes based on harm and harm reduction and what real evidence says, scotching all these myths about the gateway effect, about nicotine being incredibly toxic at these levels. None of this is true. It's all entrenching the tobacco industry's position and the pharmaceuticals industry's position. And the pharmaceutical industry has been very active in Brussels over the last 5 years trying to get e-cigarettes regulated as medical products. That didn't happen, but it only didn't happen because thousands of vapers around Europe managed to get together, went to Brussels, wrote to their local MEP. There was an unusual amount of public involvement in that element of the Tobacco Products Directive. Not enough to make it really fit for purpose, but it certainly made it a lot better than it would have been. And we have to remember here, most of this is none of the EU's business, really. If Finland wants to go off and ban e-cigarettes, as they have done, I think they're making a mistake, but I think they should be free to do it. Similarly, if Britain wants to allow bottles of e-cigarette fluid to be sold in 20 millilitres, then I don't see how that is any of the EU's business, in the same way as it's none of their business if people want to sell menthol cigarettes or cigarettes in packs of 10.
Okay, gentlemen, it's been really thought-provoking listening to both your differing points of view on this topic. Thank you very much for joining us, Christopher Snowdon and Enrico Brivio. In today's Picture This, thousands of people have been forced to evacuate their homes in Alberta, Canada because of a raging wildfire. Let's take a look.
The people here are devastated. Everyone's devastated. The community is going to be devastated.
Today's newsmaker has been Donald Trump, as we asked if anyone or anything can stop him from getting the Republican nomination. His only serious competition, Ted Cruz, has left the race after losing in Indiana. But will the grand old party really allow him to be their nominee? Trump has been seen as the outsider, a first-time candidate who has shaken up conventions and the contest. But now it appears the Republican Party will have to get behind him if they want to beat the Democrats to the White House. You've been watching this edition of the Newsmakers with me, Ron Bonjean. As always, thanks for watching. See you soon. Bye-bye.